which song are we looking at now?
We're looking at Eternal Father, Strong to Save.
Awesome.
Another one of my favorite hymns.
Same.
Well written by William Whiting, who wrote the words. He lived from 1825 to 1878. And John Dykes, who lived from 1823 to 1876. Both of those men didn't live very long. But interesting. John Dykes is a well-known composer.
Yes.
So many songs. I've forgotten how many he wrote, but he was a genius at what he did. And by the way, this Eternal Father, Strong to Save was one of the hymns that I did with my trombone choir.
Oh, good.
I love that trombone choir, and this was back when I was just in my 30s. I still hadn't written any original things, but I love these hymns. And this one, I did it in an unusual way. The trombone choir at that point had gotten pretty good size. I probably was getting up close to 20 or maybe over 20 in the choir.
Excellent.
And so I arranged this one for them to be down on the stage in the Rodeheaver Auditorium there in Greenville, and four of us up in the balcony.
Oh, wow.
And actually, we started on the stairs going up into the balcony, and from the back, from the lobby, and we did taps on there. The trombones played taps. And then, as the trombone choir down on the stage was playing the first stanza, we moved up, and then we came down the steps to the front of the balcony. And when they got through that first stanza, then we played the quartet from up there in the balcony. Four of us. By the way, Don Harwood, who was with the New York Philharmonic for 32 years, was the bass trombone in that quartet. And so we played that, and then there was an interlude there, and then on the last stanza, we were playing the melody, and the trombone choir wasn't doing like an accompaniment for it.
Oh, nice.
And the sound was coming out the audience. And they were looking around to see where's all this sound coming from. And that was this hymn.
Excellent.
I loved it so much, and I think I had a fairly decent arrangement of it. I'd have to go back and check. I think we've got it recorded, so we shall see.
Great.
But anyway, this great hymn is commonly known as the Navy hymn. Since the first and last stanzas by William Whiting are primarily for those who go to sea. Robert Spencer wanted to make it apply to more than just only seagoers. So around 1937, he lived, I don't have his name on here. I can't remember now. In 1930, he lived into this century, in the 1900s. He added stanzas 2 and 3, and probably the last part of stanza 4. It is obvious that both men knew the scriptures, since they each included biblical phrases in their lyrics. The primary passage is Psalm 107, 23 through 32, with emphasis on verses 23 and 24, which say, "They that go down to the sea in ships see great works of the Lord and his wonders in the deep." So that is very interesting. Because of the tune Melita that was appropriately composed for it by John Dykes, he was one of England's competent composers of that century. It was recognized for its value both lyrically and musically. As a young composer in my 30s, I admired it so much that I used it as well. Not so much is known about Whiting, except that he taught at Winchester College Chorister School for 35 years. He wrote the lyrics for a number of other hymns, but none of them have survived, as far as we know. Very interesting. This is so true for many lyricists and composers. The average, by the way, is between 0.002 to 3%.
Oh, wow.
That's of all those who write lyrics or compose music for hymns and gospel songs. You can go through, somewhere along the line we may talk about that, how like Fanny Crosby wrote probably between 8,000 and 10,000 hymns. We know, about 15 of them?
Yeah, not many.
The percentage is right at 0.002. Very interesting. Okay. On the other hand, John Dykes, the composer of the tune, probably has composed a number of his tunes like Holy, 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 Jesus, the very thought of thee, that are still sung today, others. When we examine this one, which he wrote especially for this text, we will see some of the reasons why his music is so well remembered and still used.
Good.
It is worth noting that the tune name Melita was named for the island of Malta, where the ship the Apostle Paul was shipwrecked on his way to Rome to be martyred in Acts 28. Very interesting. One of the most obvious musical archetypes that Dyke employs is the written in crescendos imposed in different ways. The first one is in measure 1 and 2. The rising line that starts in the soprano voice in measure 1 is continued on with 8 notes in the tenor and bass in measure 2. The second one is in measures 5 through 7, beginning in both soprano and bass in measures 5 and 6, and continued on by the bass in measure 7. So interesting how those things work out. Dykes then adds more subtle ones in measures 9 and 10 in the soprano, but he also uses a 1/7 flat 7 on the first half of measure 9 to show how we are nearing the close of the hymn. You want to explain that again for us?
Yes. Yeah, that taking that tonic chord and turning it into a 5/7 chord, it typically leads to the 4 chord, as it does here. It helps to propel us. Many times you are seeing it, as you just mentioned, heading into a final cadence, letting us know we're just about done. We're almost home because you hear a bit of tonic in there, but it's still wanting to push to that 4 chord and keep pushing us until we get to the final cadence, that tonic chord there at the end.
All of these archetypes are remarkably painting the words to which they are applied in all 4 stanzas again. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Not just one, but even the 5/7 in first inversion on count 4 measure 10, going into measure 11, emphasizes for those or from every, twice, and glad praise in exactly the right place. That's where what you and I are talking about, the phonics of music, how that it's so important. And if you just sing the melody, the soprano part, you're missing
so much.
3/4 of what is there.
Exactly.
And it's all usually in the harmonies and the other points. Like in this case, it was in the bass. That's where it comes. And so often, as we learned from Bach in our first podcast, Bach even wrote his chorales on 4 separate staves because he wanted each one to be a melody. Now, that's why a lot of people don't sing Bach today. It's too involved because they get used to singing just the one part, but they miss out the most important part. And quite often, it's the bass that is in harmony with the soprano. And the other parts are sometimes just filling in. So, but you get the harmony is what gets the accents in just exactly the right place.
Exactly.
And quite often in what we call an ornament. What would you explain as an ornament for us, Tim?
It's kind of like a decoration, like an ornament on a tree or an ornament in on some decoration. I'm not good at decorating houses, but some kind of decoration like that. It's a similar idea in the music where it decorates and adds a little something extra to the lyric or the music at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I see that here where I'm living now. Folks, so I guess we've mentioned it before. I live with my daughter Gina and her husband David here right on the water.
Yeah.
And I look at the house and they have an Airbnb upstairs. They've made into that. And I was up there the other day watching the decorations she put in. And so many of the people who have come mentioned that.
Yes.
We see all the little extra decorations. By the way, that was my wife. It was the little things.
Yep.
Let me just mention one.
Yes.
In our church where I served for years, started before Gene and I started together, 100 in the church and 8 in the choir. And then when the church got large, my wife always picked out my ties for me. And if I wore one tie in the morning, she always had a different tie for me to wear in the evening. It's interesting how many people notice, why do you always change your tie? I said, that's my wife. She was interested in the little decorations. And by the way, I see that in her music.
Yes.
She was interested. I got the big ideas. She was interested in the little fine points, those little ornaments, you would call them. Like we talked about in the last podcast. We talked about the 4/3 suspensions or 9/8 suspension, the quartal quintal harmonies that are not, or the where it leaps a third, or where it leaps a reason, or the bass leaps an octave for a reason. There's always a reason for it. And Flora G she didn't know how to explain it, but her mind said it. And I hope somewhere along the line we can put some of her piano recordings on and show how she applied what we're teaching to her piano playing. Like when she plays Wonderful Grace of Jesus, you know she's thinking the words. When she does down the what a fellowship, she's painting the words. My sin is all forgiven. She's painting the words. You can see
Exactly.
it. It's there. These are several more. There are several more devices than Dykes, this composer we're talking about. But let's just look at two.
Okay.
Number is one where he places the dotted quarter and eighth notes. First in the tenor in measure 1 for Father, then twice in the alto in measure 7 for Own Appointed Limits. He also uses that same rhythm in all 4 voices in measures 5 and 6. Again in measures 9 and 10, and finally in measure 12. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
The way he deliberately played. Now, I believe he was conscious about that. What do you think?
Oh, yes. With a composer such as Dykes and Mrs. Garlock and others who are very conscious of the text, they want to make sure that the music flows and supports the text. Dr. Allen likes to say, put the emphasis on the wrong syllable, because if it just doesn't line up, it doesn't work as well, and it's not as masterfully composed. And that attention to details of putting the dotted note at just the right spot so that it emphasizes the word and the meaning of the lyric at that point.
And I think he was conscious of that.
Yes, very
It wasn't an accident.
No, not at all.
Okay. This puts a fitting ending on all the adumbrations and Hebrew parallelisms that are in this outstanding jewel of poetry and a masterful treasure of musical genius.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting? We usually think, when you think of musical genius, we put it on Handel, Haydn, Beethoven, those composers. We miss it on hymns. And it's so interesting. These men, like Dykes and Barnby, we've already mentioned, they did not write long works. Isn't that interesting? They put all their talents into hymns and gospel songs.
But there's a lot there.
Yeah. And all of us are doing it by analyzing it phonetically, and we're revealing the ability God can give to those who dedicate their talents to Him and use it for His glory.
Yes, good.
And Tim, I think I should say right here, that's what you and I have done. I believe you do that in your teaching. Yes. I did it in my teaching.
Yep, it's my desire.
Maybe I should mention this. My spiritual gift, I'd be interested to know what yours is. There are 7 spiritual gifts.
Right.
Mine is called exhortation. I don't do it for myself. I do it to make other people successful.
Good.
And if I do that when I teach my choir. With my choir, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the choir, to make them successful. And that's what I always did for my students. I didn't want to be known as a great teacher. I wanted them to be known for what I taught them.
Yes.
And so to me, that's a spiritual gift that God gives some of us.
Right.
And I think any choir director, if he doesn't already have it, I take like the Apostle Paul. He started with one gift. He had the gift of prophecy. Everything was right or wrong. Like John, young John, he came with him first and then left. And Paul said, "Nothing. I want nothing to do with it."
Right.
Later on, he developed that gift of prophet, the gift of exhortation. He said, "Bring him. He's profitable to me."
He's profitable. Good.
And so that's what we want to do here in these podcasts. We're trying to help people to see what God has done already for hundreds of years, not just now.
Right.
Hundreds of years, and what we can still do today to make our lives effective for God.
Good. Thank you.